$2.2 trillion in urgently needed relief for our nation's families.
What we've done here at MSNBC is we've assembled a team of some of our best journalists from different departments who are going to listen along with me to what the president is saying. Usually there's a component that is the president. He's often accompanied by people around him. He's not holding this inside now. He's holding it outside. You can see the reporters are spaced out. They are going to be there. I see Kelly O'Donnell. I see Yamisha Alcindor. They are going to be there to be asking the president some questions. But sometimes the president takes liberties, to say the least. So our team is going to be here with me to be able to run down some of the things the president has said that we're not sure about and either confirm them or let you know otherwise. We're going to be doing that through the course of this. In some instances, what we're going to do is let the information come out because the president often has the vice president there who's got details about things that are happening that are not politicized. He often has Dr. Anthony Fauci or Dr. Deborah Bricks with him with medical information, and other times he'll have the Surgeon General or other experts who are actually delivering information, usually.
It looks like the White House coronavirus briefing is getting started. Let us listen in to the briefing as it begins. Ali Velshi's having technical issues. So as we're watching, this is a live scene in the Rose Garden. They have moved the briefing out of the briefing room, and they're doing it in the Rose Garden. We are told unofficially that one of the reasons is there's more room in the Rose Garden in terms of keeping social distancing, trying to abide by it as they had done in the briefing room, but it's a more clustered room from my visits to the White House. I can attest to that. And being that it's good weather today in Washington, D.C., they are doing it in the Rose Garden. We had gotten the 2-minute warning, so we had gone there. We're still waiting on them to come back. I think we've straightened out the technical problems with Ali Velshi, my colleague. Let me go back to Ali.
Well, that's a sign of our times, Rev. We're doing this from homes. We have staff. We're trying to reduce our staff to an absolute minimum, so they're in different places. And mostly it works, but once in a while, a gremlin creeps into the system. But as you said, they are spacing it out a little bit more. They're trying to hold these things out. The number of reporters who are now admitted to these things is much smaller to maintain the space, and you'll notice that the reporters, unlike the typical fashion, get several more questions because they are now a smaller group of them who are asking the president a number of questions. You'll notice they just put out a series of chairs in front of the first row of reporters where you can always see Kelly O'Donnell there on the red side with her red hair. But the president's going to come out. We do not know yet what news the president has. Usually it's an update on either cases or equipment and supplies that the president has had to had a chance to procure on behalf of states. He'll often talk about conversations he's had, or in yesterday's case, conversations that he refused to have with some state governors. He made a point of saying that he had told Mike Pence, who is ostensibly in charge of the federal government's response to coronavirus, not to call the governors of Washington and Michigan. He then referred to the governor of Michigan as Gretchen Half-Whitmer, and he has referred to the governor of Washington, Jay Inslee, as a snake in the past. But basically, he said things that, like, he wasn't appreciated. He didn't think they were appreciating the federal government's response, and if they're not appreciative, he's not going to call them. This, of course, created quite a response nationwide because the president is the president of all Americans, not those whose governors he likes or doesn't like. The other big thing that came out of yesterday's update was that the president said he was considering quarantining the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. That created a response because he hadn't spoken to the governors of those states. Governor Cuomo of New York had said he definitely hadn't spoken to the president about it, didn't know what that meant, and thought that that would be akin to an act of war, sending the military into sovereign states. The president then came out and said he's not considering doing that, but instead asked the Centers for Disease Control to impose travel restrictions on people around the tri-state area. Now, the law provides for the Centers for Disease Control to be able to quarantine people who are believed to have an infectious disease. It does not apply to an entire population or people defined by a geographic area like a city or a tri-state area. You've actually got to believe that individuals are carriers of an infection, in which case the CDC does have the authority to quarantine, but that doesn't extend to the federal government more broadly. So what they can't do is impose a quarantine on a region. Remember, if you needed to impose a quarantine and you needed to enforce it, you'd need some sort of a force. And generally speaking, that would be the National Guard. In America, the National Guard is controlled by a governor in a given state. Hence, the president doesn't typically have the authority to go in there and send the National Guard in to do certain things. Now, we have had certain instances of this right now in the United States. For instance, in Rhode Island, the governor has imposed a restriction saying that anybody arriving in Rhode Island by any mode of transportation after visiting any other state for non-work purposes is going to be asked to self-quarantine, and to enforce that he has placed members of the National Guard at the airports, train stations, bus stops, and terminals. But that is a governor of a state asking the National Guard to contain people, to quarantine people. We have heard in Texas that they're looking for people coming in from Louisiana on the east, which has a lot of cases. New Orleans has a mortality rate from coronavirus that's actually higher than New York State's is at the moment. The other thing I'm going to ask my control room for is we've got a map that shows you where the cases of coronavirus are. While we're waiting for the president to come out, I just want to show you this map, because while New York is the epicenter of this, and we have a lot of cases in Seattle. Yeah, I'd like to put up that map if I can, just to show our viewers that this is spreading across the country. It's a different map I've got, actually. It's got circles of cities, if my control room can put that up. These are all the states that have confirmed cases, and we know that 100% of U.S. states have confirmed cases. But what we're able to see on this other map is hotspots in cities, and by far the hottest hotspot is New York State, Connecticut, New Jersey, and to some extent Rhode Island. Beyond that, you see Florida is a hot spot. You see hot spots in Detroit, in Chicago, Seattle, we obviously know about. Los Angeles is showing some heat, and New Orleans. Those are the areas. I'll ask my control room to bring me that map when we've got a chance. It's a different map. It's a white map with red dots on it. But the story here is that it is spreading. And what the president seems to be concerned about is coronavirus spreading, particularly to Florida, where the governor there, DeSantis, had decided to delay implementation of certain techniques that were meant to prevent the spread of coronavirus. While the president approaches the podium, we'll wait for the president to speak. And then, as I told you, we have our team of journalists here at MSNBC prepared to analyze what the president is saying.
Appreciate everybody being here. Beautiful day in the Rose Garden. Tremendous distance between chairs. Social distancing. You practice it very well. We appreciate it. That's great. I want to start today by highlighting several critical developments on both the testing and treatment that will help us win our war against the coronavirus. On Friday, the FDA authorized a new test developed by Abbott Labs that delivers lightning-fast results in as little as 5 minutes. That's a whole new ballgame. I want to thank Abbott Labs for the incredible work they've done. They've been working around the clock. Normally, this approval process from the FDA would take 10 months and even longer, but we did it in 4 weeks. Abbott has stated that they will begin delivering 50,000 tests each day starting this week. And as you know, even before this development, we've been doing more tests than any other country anywhere in the world. It's one of the reasons that we have more cases than other countries, because we've been testing. It's also one of the reasons that we're just about the lowest in terms of mortality rate, because we've been doing more testing. So we have bigger numbers to look at. I want to also thank General Semonite of the Army Corps of Engineers and General Pavlovicek, who's here with us, who's going to say a few words in a little while. What the Army Corps of Engineers did, along with FEMA in New York, was incredible. They built 2,900 beds worth of hospital, an incredible hospital in the Javits Center, which I know well. And I just want to say that was unreal. They did it in less than 4 days. People have never seen anything like that. And it's an incredible, complex, top-of-the-line hospital. They did it so quickly. Everyone's trying to figure out how they did it, including me, and I was a good builder. But they did it very quickly, Mike, so we're very happy. So I want to thank Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, the incredible job they have done. Now they're moving to other locations throughout the country where they already have people building hospitals. We're doing them in Louisiana and New Jersey, many other places. But these are incredible men and women, and they worked around the clock, and the people of New York are very happy. Governor Cuomo expressed his thanks, which we appreciate. But these are, I mean, nobody could have done a job like that. Most people have never seen anything like it. The deployment of rapid testing will vastly accelerate our ability to monitor, track, contain, and ultimately defeat the virus. We will defeat the virus. It will also allow us to test doctors, nurses, and other healthcare workers immediately, and enable us to act quickly and aggressively to shut down the spread of the virus, so important in critical facilities like hospitals and nursing homes. And we will ensure that we can give cities and states the best information to guide local decision makers and making. I want to point out that the hydroxychloroquine is being administered to 1,100 patients, people in New York, along with the Z-Pak, which is azithromycin. And it's very early yet. It started 2 days ago. But we will see what happens. I want to thank Stephen Hahn, who's a great doctor, left one of the best jobs in our country running an incredible hospital in Texas. And he's the head of the FDA, and Stephen got approval for that so fast. Let's see how it works. It may not, but we may have some incredible results. We're going to know soon. So it's being tested on 1,100 people in New York. The FDA is also allowing the emergency use of a blood-related therapy called convalescent plasma as an experimental treatment for seriously ill patients. This treatment involves taking blood plasma from patients who have already recovered from the virus. So they're recovered, they're strong, something was good in them that worked. And so we take the plasma from those people that have recovered so well, meaning their plasma is rich in antibodies against the virus, and transfusing it into sick patients very, very powerfully. So sick patients will be transfused with the blood taken to boost their immune system. We'll see what happens, and we're having some early results that are good, but we will see, and that's going, I think, very rapidly. Again, we got approvals in really very quick time. We're also looking at an approval for the sterilization of masks. I kept saying to myself, I'd see some of the masks are very complex. We're delivering millions, by the way, millions. But I kept saying, why aren't they able to use that mask a second, third, fourth time? And Mike DeWine, the great governor of Ohio, called me. They have a company that is in the final process of getting approval for the sterilization of masks. And in some cases, depending on the mask, some of these masks are very, very strong, very powerful, very strong material. They're able to sterilize the mask up to 20 times. So that's, I guess, like getting 20 masks. And so we worked on that. As soon as I heard from Mike today, I got involved, and the FDA is now involved, and we're trying to get a fast approval for the sterilization of masks. That would be a tremendous difference. It would be really helpful. While much of the research has to be done, we have a lot of research left to do. Obviously, this treatment on plasma has shown promising results in other countries. We're in communication with other countries, and very strong communications, and they're very reliant on us in just about all cases. We have the greatest people in the world. They're very, very anxious to find out how we're doing on our different things, whether it's a cure or whether it's really anything having to do with getting people better. We have some interesting things will be announced, I think, over the next few weeks, but we'll see what happens. They're being tested right now. The vaccines are moving along very rapidly. The vaccines are an answer, but I'd like to see if we could do something therapeutically so that we could take care of the people that are already sick. And we're working on that at a level that people would be amazed. These are incredible people. They don't stop. This method also has been used for more than a century, and that's the blood-related therapy, more than a century to fight off infectious diseases. So it's not unusual. Our level of complexity has changed, but it's a concept that's been used for a long time, including during the Spanish flu epidemic. And that was really a pandemic of proportions like, frankly, nobody's seen until what we're facing now. That was in 1918. You know what the result of that was? Probably from 75 to 100 million people were killed. And also other viruses like the one in this outbreak. This is a very tough one. This is a tough one because it spread so quickly, like nothing we've seen. It spreads so easily, so quickly. We're unleashing every tool in our nation's vast arsenal, economic, if you look, medical and scientific, military, homeland security is working very, very hard with all of them in order to vanquish the virus. As you know, every level of government, state, local, and federal, is working nonstop to obtain more personal protective equipment for frontline workers. We're delivering vast orders of this material. I'm going to ask a couple of the people here to join me that both make it and deliver it. Joining us today are the leaders of America's largest distributors of pharmaceuticals and medical equipment, including McKesson, Cardinal Health, Henry Schein, Owens & Minor, Medline, FedEx, and UPS. We just concluded a very productive meeting about ways to keep our supply chains and delivery systems moving at top speed. And maybe I'd like to just ask for a couple of minutes for Mike Kaufman to come up, and maybe Ed Paseka. Mike is with Cardinal, and Ed is Owen & Minor. But I appreciate, and if anybody else has anything, please come up. But if you could come up, Mike, for a second, and Ed for a second, just you could maybe say what you told me before when we had the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thanks for your leadership on this. Because of that leadership, we have really seen the government agencies working with industry like no time before. We've seen HHS, FEMA, the CDC work incredibly effectively with all of the distributors, and all of the distributors working together for the good of the people. And all of us have been so focused on making sure that we take care of our customers, because our customers are the ones that are taking care of the patients every day, and we need to do everything we can to make things good for them. And so it's been great to see how well all these government agencies have been coordinating together with us.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me first start by thanking the administration for all the support you have provided to the industry. You know, one of the things we did hear the challenge, and starting in January, we've ramped up our production in the Americas, including our facility in North Carolina, where we are now manufacturing an additional 40 to 50 million masks per month to get into the U.S. healthcare system. And we talked a little bit about this in the pre-meeting. One of the issues we're struggling with is the demand increase. You know, I used an anecdotal example of one hospital in New York that traditionally uses roughly 10 to 20,000 masks a week, are now using 200,000 to 300,000 masks a week. So you multiply that times the entire U.S., let alone the same demand outside of the U.S. That's part of the issue we're running into, is even with a significant ramp up in supply, you know, there's still that demand that is much greater than that supply.
Thank you very much. And I bring that up because when we discussed back in a room, we were in a conference room, very nice one actually, it's called the Cabinet Room. That statement was made that they've been delivering for years 10 to 20,000 masks. Okay, it's a New York hospital, it's packed all the time. How do you go from 10 to 20 to 300,000, 10 to 20,000 masks to 300,000, even though this is different? Something's going on, and you ought to look into it as reporters. Where are the masks going? Are they going out the back door? How do you go from 10,000 to 300,000? And we have that in a lot of different places. So somebody should probably look into that, because I just don't see from a practical standpoint how that's possible to go from that to that. And we have that happening in numerous places. And not to that extent. That was the highest number I've heard. That's the highest number you've seen, I would imagine, right? But this man makes them and delivers them to a lot of hospitals. He knows the system better than anybody, and I think you were more surprised than I was when you saw that number, so thank you very much. I hope I didn't get any of your clients in trouble, but it could be that they are in trouble. So they have to look at that in New York. FEMA is working with these companies to launch Project Airbridge to expedite the movement of critical supplies from other countries to the United States. The first flight arrived at JFK Airport, New York, this morning, filled with 80 tons of personal protective equipment, including 130,000 N95 respirators. Those are the ones that we were talking about before. 1.8 million face masks and gowns, 10.3 million gloves, and many other things. Millions and millions of different items. FEMA has scheduled 19 additional flights and is adding more daily. We hope to have about 50 flights. We're going to have, I think, including the one that came in today, we're up at 51 flights with these massive planes from the different companies that were so nice to be here today. Would you like to say something on behalf? Please come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for the incredible leadership. I will share with you that UPS is really proud to be part of this effort. Vice President Pence.
Hospital chains, as we call them, they are holding ventilators. They don't want to let them up. We need them for... Hospital chains, as we call them, they are holding ventilators. They don't want to let them up. We need them for certain areas where there's big problems. We can't hold them if they think there might be a problem weeks down the road. So we've delivered a lot, and this group has been really fantastic. We want to thank you, and UPS and FedEx. In particular, you've gone absolutely out of your way, so we appreciate everything you've done and delivered. The federal government continues to mobilize every resource to make sure our frontline doctors and nurses have the equipment needed to save American lives. Yesterday, I visited Naval Station Norfolk as the USNS Comfort departed for New York 3 weeks ahead of schedule, fully loaded with 12 operating rooms, 1,000 hospital beds, and hundreds of the best doctors, nurses, and medical professionals anywhere in the United States Navy, anywhere, frankly, in the United States. It was an incredible thing to see. Most of you saw that on television as it was leaving. It left literally 3 weeks early. It was under maintenance, and they got the maintenance done very quickly. They worked round the clock, as many of the people have, and it was a great sight. Additionally, two of the country's largest health insurers, Humana and Cigna, are announcing that they will waive copays, which is a big deal for anybody that understands insurance. They don't waive copays too easily, but we've asked them to do it, and they've done it. Co-insurance and deductibles for the coronavirus treatments to help ease the financial burden on American families during this pandemic. So they're waiving copays, co-insurance, and deductibles. I don't think anyone's heard of that one. Have you heard of that one before? I haven't heard. I want to thank them. Great companies. Today I spoke with Wolfgang Puck. Wolfgang Puck is a great restaurateur, as you know, as is Jean-Georges and Thomas Keller and Daniel Ballou and other leaders in the restaurant business, which has been probably one of the hardest hit industries. I've directed my staff to use any and all authority available to give restaurants, bars, clubs incentives to stay open. You're going to lose all these restaurants, and they're not going to make it back. They have to get going. So what I'm doing is I'm going to tell Secretary Mnuchin and also our great Secretary of Labor, who you know very well, to immediately start looking into the restoring of the deductibility of meals and entertainment costs for corporations. That set the restaurant business back a lot when it was done originally and then done not so long ago. And we're going to go to deductibility so that companies can send people to restaurants. I think it'll have a tremendous impact and maybe keep them open. I mean, don't forget, some are closing right now, despite the fact that they could be open in the not too distant future. We expect that, but there are some that aren't going to be able to get open, and we want to make sure they do. So we're going to look at the restoring the deductibility of meals and entertainment costs for corporations so that corporations can send people to restaurants and take a deduction on it like they did in the old days. That was when restaurants were doing really well. The financial relief bill I signed on Friday provided historic relief for American workers and small businesses. It includes $350 billion in job restoration and retention. So if you look at job retention loans for small businesses, that's a big deal, with loan forgiveness available for businesses that continue paying the workers. So it's $350 billion. Job retention loans for small businesses with loan forgiveness available for businesses that continue paying workers. I mean, how about that? $300 billion in direct cash payments are being sent to every American citizen earning less than $99,000 per year, $3,400 for the typical family of four. So they'll be getting a check for $3,400 for the typical family of four. Approximately $250 billion in expanded unemployment benefits. Under this plan, the average worker who has lost his or her job will receive 100% of their salary for up to 4 full months. The bill provides for these unemployment checks to be delivered through the existing state unemployment systems, not us, state. And I was opposed to this method because many of the states have very antiquated computer systems that are 45 years old, and they're not prepared to handle this kind of distribution, this kind of money coming in so quickly. They're not set up for that, and I didn't want to do it, but our opponents wanted it, so we did it. And if they don't get their money fast, I'm going to ask that we convene the federal government, that we come back to Congress, and we'll do something where we take care of it, because we can take care of it very easily and quickly, and I said that. But a lot of these systems are so old and so antiquated at the state level that they're going to have the money, they're going to get the money very quickly, but they're not going to be able to distribute it. So remember what I said, and we will, if we have to, call Congress back or find some other way of delivery of the money. Throughout this great national struggle, the American people have embodied the unrivaled patriotism and willpower that has led America to conquer every challenge, every single one in our nation's history. More than 90% of Americans say they are staying home as much as possible, putting their lives, their careers, their educations, and their dreams on hold out of devotion to their fellow citizens and to their country. Social distancing, that's the way you win. These shared sacrifices are pulling our nation together like never before. Family bonds are strengthening. Neighbors are looking after neighbors. It's incredible. I'm seeing, you're seeing, everybody's seeing what's happening. Communities are rallying for the cause, and all divisions are fading away. The Americans of every background are uniting to help our nation in this hour of need. It's up to 151 countries. So when we say our nation and the world, when you think of it, 151 countries. Somebody said to me today that wasn't in this particular world, they didn't know that we had that many countries. 151 countries, that's something. And some are struggling at a level that nobody would have believed possible. If you look at Italy, if you look at France is having big problems. Spain is having incredible problems. Something we did very well is when we stopped the inflow from China at a very early level. That was a good thing to do, great thing to do. We would have had thousands and thousands of more deaths. And we also stopped the inflow from Europe at a very early level. But those things were very important, especially the initial one, because we had never done anything like it, where we closed our borders to a country like that. The modeling put together by Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci and our other top healthcare we have, and these people are amazing, the healthcare experts who in this country are the best in the world. They demonstrate that the mitigation measures we are putting in place may significantly reduce the number of new infections and ultimately the number of fatalities. I want the American people to know that your selfless, inspiring, and valiant efforts are saving countless lives. You are making the difference. The modeling estimates that the peak in death rate is likely to hit in 2 weeks. So, I'll say it again. The peak, the highest point of death rates, remember this, is likely to hit in 2 weeks. Nothing would be worse than declaring victory before the victory is won. That would be the greatest loss of all. Therefore, the next 2 weeks and during this period, it's very important that everyone strongly follow the guidelines, have to follow the guidelines that our great Vice President holds up a lot. He's holding that up a lot. He believes in it so strongly. The better you do, the faster this whole nightmare will end. Therefore, we will be extending our guidelines to April 30th to slow the spread. On Tuesday, we will be finalizing these plans and providing a summary of our findings, supporting data, and strategy to the American people. So we'll be having lots of meetings in between, but we'll be having a very important statement made on Tuesday, probably Tuesday evening, on all of the findings, all of the data, and the reasons we're doing things the way we're doing them. We can expect that by June 1st, we will be well on our way to recovery. We think by June 1st, a lot of great things will be happening. I want every citizen in our country to take heart and confidence in the fact that we have the best medical minds in the world tackling this disease. We have the best science, the best researchers, and the best talent anywhere working night and day to protect your family and loved ones and to overcome this pandemic. With the grace of God, we are rising to the occasion. We are proving that no darkness can overshadow the eternal light of American courage. We will win, and when we do, we will rebound with astonishing force and speed. We will be stronger than ever, and we will have learned so much where something like this can never hurt us to the extent it has, and the world. Again, in our present crisis, the strength of our people is our single most important asset, and together we will defeat this invisible curse, this invisible enemy, and rise to incredible new heights. So I just want to thank you all for being here, and we'll take some questions if you'd like. Yeah, please, Kelly.
Mr. President, Dr. Fauci said he thought there could be in excess of 1 million cases in the United States and deaths could exceed 100,000. Do you accept that assessment, and has that formed your thinking about extending these guidelines? And you also talked about New York. Were you suggesting there has been inappropriate use of masks or improper conduct with supplies?
No, I want the people in New York to check, Governor Cuomo, Mayor de Blasio, that when a hospital that's getting 10,000 masks goes to 300,000 masks during the same period, and that's a rapid period, I would like them to check that, because I hear stories like that all the time. You know, we're delivering millions and millions of different products, and all we do is hear that, can you get some more? But when you hear that, and I heard that from one of the great companies of the world at doing this, it's a client, and they're going from, you heard it, 10,000, 20,000 tops to 300,000, and that's a hospital that's always full. So I think people should check that, because there's something going on. It's not, I don't think it's hoarding. I think it's maybe worse than hoarding, but check it out. Check it out. I don't know. I think that's for other people to figure out. But you don't go from numbers like that. Now, other equipment likewise, because we're delivering a lot of ventilators. And we're building, by the way, we're building and buying, and we have a lot of ventilators that we're going to be sending out very soon. We also have right now in the stockpile almost 10,000 ventilators that we have to hold in case of emergency. We don't want them going out, and then Louisiana has a tremendous problem, which we now know they do. You know, all of a sudden it came very quickly. I mean, Louisiana was doing so fantastically well, then all of a sudden it was a big rash of cases. So we have to be prepared to move the ventilators. Are very important pieces of equipment. They're very expensive and they're very complex. It's like building a car. You know, these are expensive, complicated, very complicated pieces of equipment. So we now have 10,000 in, and we inherited a system which was broken. Just like, I'll never forget the day when a general came and said, "Sir, my first week in office, we have no ammunition." That was in the military. We've now rebuilt our military, stronger than it's ever been, and we have so much ammunition. You wouldn't believe it, how much ammunition we have. But the same thing here. We had a stockpile that was deficient. We had testing that was no good. We had a testing situation that just wasn't right. It was okay for very small cases, but it was obsolete and it was broken, and it was only good for a very small situation. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask Dr. Fauci to come forward and discuss the number, because I think the number is going to be a very different number than the numbers that you talked about. Please, Doctor, you might talk about that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, the number I gave out is, based on modeling, and I think it's entirely conceivable that if we do not mitigate to the extent that we're trying to do, that you could reach that number. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, you could make a big soundbite about it, but the fact is it's possible. What we're trying to do is not let that happen. So instead of concentrating on the upper and the lower, we're saying that we're trying to push it all the way down. But the second part of your question was, yes, we feel that the mitigation that we're doing right now is having an effect. It's very difficult to quantitate it because you have two dynamic things going on at the same time. You have the virus going up and you have the mitigation trying to push it down. But the decision to but to extend this mitigation process until the end of April, I think was a wise and prudent decision. Dr. Birx and I spent a considerable amount of time going over all the data, why we felt this was a best choice of us, and the president accepted it. So in direct answer to your question, the idea that we may have these many cases played a role in our decision in trying to make sure that we don't do something prematurely and pull back when we should be pushing.
Deborah, please, could you explain the 2.2 million if you did nothing? Because a lot of people would like to know that.
So thank you. I mean, you all know you've all seen the models. You've seen the models from Imperial. You've seen the models from Columbia. We've reviewed 12 different models. And then we went back to the drawing board over the last week or two and worked from the ground up, utilizing actual reporting of cases. It's the way we built the HIV model, the TB model, the malaria model. And when we finished, the other group that was working in parallel, which we didn't know about, HIME, and Chris Murray, ended up at the same numbers. So if you go on his website, you can see the concern that we had with the growing number of potential fatalities. All of the flu models predicted anywhere between 1.6 and 2.2 million fatalities if we didn't mitigate. I think you all knew those numbers. Some of them predicted half of the United States would get infected and have that level of mortality. So we've worked very hard together to really look at all of the impacts of the different mitigations that have been utilized around the world and use that evidence base to really bring that data and that evidence to the president to consider for extending, which is not a simple situation when you ask people to stay home for another 30 days. And so they have to know that we've really built this on scientific evidence and the potential to save really hundreds of thousands of American lives. And we know that's a huge sacrifice for everyone. We know it's a sacrifice for every mother and child and father who's also self-isolating. There are people that have to go out to work, and we know the compromises that they're making. But it's all to protect not only Americans, but the healthcare providers. The healthcare providers that are on the front lines, and you've seen them, and you've seen how difficult this has been. And so we're really working. There will be a comprehensive piece presented on Tuesday that really talks about not only diagnosing individuals, but also increasing our surveillance now that we have more test kits so that we can really stop and contain new infections. At the same time, we're really dedicating test kits still to the critical diagnosis so people can get the treatment that they want. And so that we can ensure as when people come to the hospital that they know that the nurses and the doctors and the equipment that they need will be there to serve them. Because together as Americans, we're going to bring down the number of infections so we don't have 2.2 million deaths or 1.6 million deaths, but really work very hard to keep this in the lowest numbers we possibly can.
Mr. President. I just want to reiterate, because a lot of people have been asking, well, what would have happened if we did nothing? Did nothing. We just wrote it out. And I've been asking that question to Tony and Deborah, and they've been talking to me about it for a long time. Other people have been asking that question. And I think we got our most accurate study today, or certainly most comprehensive. Think of the number, 2.2, potentially 2.2 million people if we did nothing. If we didn't do the distancing, if we didn't do all of the things that we're doing. And when you hear those numbers, you start to realize that with the kind of work we went through last week with the $2.2 trillion, it no longer sounds like a lot, right? So you're talking about, when I heard the number today, first time I've heard that number, because I've been asking the same question that some people have been asking, I felt even better about what we did last week with the $2.2 trillion, because you're talking about a potential of up to 2.2 billion, and some people said it could even be higher than that. So you're talking about 2.2 million deaths, 2.2 million people from this. And so if we could hold that down, as we're saying, to 100,000, it's a horrible number. Maybe even less, but to 100,000. So we have between 100 and 200,000. We all together have done a very good job. But 2.2 up to 2.2 million deaths, and maybe even beyond that, I'm feeling very good about what we did last week. Yes, please, go ahead, please.
Mr. President, given that you're announcing that you're extending these guidelines, was floating Easter a mistake, do you think? And
no.
Does this, can you tell us why? And then,
it was just an aspiration. We actually will be hitting, potentially, this was with our meeting before, on Easter, we probably, well, that could be a peak. That could be a peak period. That could be the peak, sadly to say, that could be the peak number of deaths before it starts coming down. No, that was aspirational. We had an aspiration of Easter. But when you hear these kind of numbers and you hear the potential travesty, we don't want to do anything where, you know, we don't want to have a spike up. We don't want to do it soon, and then all of a sudden you go down, you're coming down, and then you start going up again, because we discussed that could happen. And we don't want that to happen. We've gone through too much. So that was an aspirational number. I didn't say Easter. I said it would be a great thing if we could do it by Easter. And we know much more now than we knew 2 or 3 weeks ago. Easter should be the peak number, and it should start coming down, and hopefully very substantially from that point. Okay, thank you. Please.
Jen Pellegrino with OAN.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. President, your approval ratings have been the highest they've ever been, as well as the ratings on your handling of the virus. Yet there are some networks that are saying they're debating whether or not to carry these briefings live. Do you think there's a link between the two?
Well, I don't know. I know that, well, that's a nice question. Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't want high approval ratings for this. I wish we could have our old life back. We had the greatest economy that we've ever had, and we didn't have death. We didn't have this. We didn't have this horrible scourge, this plague, you call it whatever you want, the virus. But we're working very hard. That's all I know. You know, I see things, I see numbers. They don't matter to me. What matters to me is that we have a victory over this thing as soon as possible. When you hear that 2.2 million people could have died if we didn't go through all of this, and now the number will be, you know, a much lower number. Hopefully it's going to be the numbers that we're talking about. So I appreciate it very much. But, you know, what I want is I want our life back again. I want our country back. I want the world back. I want the world to get rid of this. This, again, 151 countries. And we're going to do it. We're going to have a great victory. We're going to have a great victory. Go ahead, please.
Sorry, buddy. Yeah, thanks. You mentioned it. I just want to make sure I was right. So Humana and Cigna are going to waive for all costs for anybody that's got the coronavirus. They're going to take care of everything?
Well, that's what they said. I told you what they're going to take.
Right.
Copays in particular, that's a big deal. Insurance companies don't do that, and I appreciate it. Humana and Cigna, they should be getting a lot of credit for that.
Will there be other companies? They're just those two?
Well, those two are getting a lot of credit right now for it, and they should, because it's something that, it's a lot of money they're waiving. And so we thank them. Will there be other companies? I wouldn't be surprised.
Are you calling on them to do it,
There's
sir?
great spirit. I'll tell you what, yeah, I'd love to have them do it. Let them waive those copays. There's a great spirit in this country right now. I mean, I know insurance companies better than anybody. They just don't do that. But now there's a spirit like I have not seen. I have never seen anything like it. I mean, even the media is much more fair. I wouldn't say all of it, but that's okay. They should be fair because they should want this to end. This is about death. So I want to thank Cigna and Humana. Thank you.
Will the federal government be reimbursing those insurance companies, or is this something they really are just doing out of their pocketbooks?
They haven't asked for reimbursement, so I assume they're not. They said they're going to waive them. Waiving them doesn't mean we're going to waive them and get reimbursed, no.
Okay. And second question for you, sir. First of the month is 3 days away. I know these cash payments are coming. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin said today about 3 weeks they should get there. For people that are worried about paying rent, I know mortgages through the HUD is taken care of, but I'm just curious about rent. What should people be doing for the first of the month?
Well, they're going to be getting the money. I will tell you, I think landlords are going to take it easy. We may put out a statement on that. I think a lot of people that are owed money are going to take it easy. They don't sort of have a choice. But a lot of concessions are made, just like the insurance companies. A lot of concessions are being made that wouldn't have even been thought of 3 weeks ago, not even thought of. So a lot of really positive things are happening. Please, behind you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, why did you publicly threaten quarantine on New York, New Jersey, parts of Connecticut?
I didn't do that at all. Read the statement. Read the statement. Read what I said. I said we're going to look into possibly quarantine. I didn't say we're going to quarantine. I looked at it as a possibility because a lot of our professionals suggested quarantine. I said we're going to look at it. We then looked at it. You see? Who are you with, Bloomberg, right? I can't imagine that. Let me just tell you, I didn't threaten it. I don't go around threatening. What happened is people, professionals, very good professionals, love the idea of doing that because that's sort of the ultimate in distancing. You can't do. They didn't want New Yorkers where they're having a problem necessarily going down to Florida where they have less of a problem. So the concept of quarantine was thrown out to me. Really would love to do it. They would love to do it. And I thought it was too much to do because the people are doing a great job with it. Also, it's very hard to enforce.
But by speaking about it publicly, I mean, by speaking about it publicly and letting it be known that it's a consideration, do you think that you maybe frightened some Americans?
No, I think we made people aware to stay in your houses and do good. Now we did an advisory. It's a strong advisory. The governors are running the advisory, the 3 governors, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. And I think we did a great thing. But all I did yesterday, as you know, you can see it, you can read it, you can read, and you can see very simply that I said that we are looking into it. And then before the end of the evening, substantially, we decided to go with the advisory, which, frankly, I liked better from the beginning. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 2 questions. The first is, you've said repeatedly that you think that some of the equipment that governors are requesting, they don't actually need. You said New York might not need 30,000. You said it on Sean Hannity's Fox News. You said
you know,
that
why don't you people act? Let me ask you.
You said
why don't you act in a little more positive? It's always trying to
get you. My question to you is,
get you. And you know what? That's why nobody trusts the media anymore.
My question to you is, how is that going to impact?
Excuse me, you didn't hear me. That's why you used to work for the Times and now you work for somebody else. Look, let me tell you something. Be nice. Don't
Mr.
be
President,
threatening.
my question is...
Don't be threatening. Be nice. Go ahead.
My question is, how is that going to impact how you fill these orders for ventilators or for masks? Your views that you're not going to, it's not going to impact you at all.
We're producing tremendous numbers of ventilators. We're doing a great job on it. Mike Pence, our vice president, has headed up the task force, which has been incredible, the job they've done. We have everybody in the White House working on it. We have everybody in the country is working on this in one way or the other. The fact is, we've done a great job of delivering. You've seen the biggest people in the business. I mean, there's nobody even close to this group of people. We had a meeting at 3 o'clock. It lasted for a long time. It was a great meeting with the generals and with everybody else, and they have done a fantastic job. I'm just saying this. If they're holding, let me give you one example. We sent thousands of generators to New York. They were put into a warehouse, a New York warehouse that happened to be located, interestingly, in Edison, New Jersey. They were given to New York, and we then went to other places, also giving thousands of ventilators. The people in New York never distributed the generators. We said, why didn't you distribute them? Now, you have to understand, they have New York people working in those warehouses. They knew they had them. So we said, why didn't you distribute them? I hope they've distributed them now, but maybe they didn't need them so badly. But just so you know, we're all, you, me, everybody, we're all on the same team. You know, when journalists get up, and you're a journalist, a fine journalist, when journalists get up
Sean Hannity
and ask questions that are so threatening.
I was quoting you directly from your interview with Sean Hannity.
Take a look at my interview. What I want to do is, if there is something wrong, we have to get to the bottom of it. When I hear face masks go from 10,000 to 300,000, and they constantly need more, and the biggest man in the business is like shocked. He knows all about the virus, by the way. He's not surprised by that. He knows all about it. He shouldn't be surprised. He should say, well, that's standard, because this is really a very tough disease. This is really a very tough virus to handle. Okay,
Mr.
please, go
President,
ahead.
my second question, Mr. President.